Hello. I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on shamanic sickness and recovery. I'm actually not really sure where this video might go even, but let me start and let's see what happens with this. It's early in the morning here, or fairly early anyway, before breakfast. I did have a coffee, but I'm still in the throes of or the aftermath of a dream, and it's still that kind of twilight zone in a way where you sort of think, well, that's an interesting atmosphere. I wonder why my subconscious dredged that particular scenario up. It's really strange. And then kind of what I generally have to do in many respects is sometimes I kind of drift back into the old mentality, the old world mentality that I've described in the previous videos. And probably because I've been making videos talking about how things used to be and how I experienced things back in colonial Africa, and it sort of makes it so that I re-inhabit that way of being, that way of looking at things. And then I've got to basically, sometimes in the morning, it's really strange, I've got to kind of put on the gear of modernity. I've got to say, well, it's not that way anymore. I can afford to be self-confident, and I've got to kind of put on the garb of self-confidence, and I can afford to express myself intellectually, and I then put on the garb of an intellect. And there are other sort of things that I need to do, like warding off shame, warding off guilt, and I have to sort of put up a shield or defense against those things. And then I can march on my merry way. But unfortunately, it's a issue of adaptation, because the naked self can often revert to the old state of affairs a bit, until I remember again. It's all about a shift in consciousness, and I have earned the right to participate fully in modernity, or almost fully, because in some ways I'm still not there yet, apparently, but for the most part, let's say 80–85%, or even 90, pushing it toward 90 now. But I've been through the processes, I've gained intellectual knowledge and skills, I've participated, I've tested the boundaries, I've done things, I've taken risks, I've participated in, as I say, in many, many different facets or aspects of life. So I've earned that right to be a fully fledged modern human being, but still there is the element of not quite there, and will never be quite there now, too old to make up that additional ground. So obviously, if I were to enter a Western workplace and try to handle office politics, no, that probably would still be way beyond me, because I'm not fast enough, quick enough on the draw, really. I have other reflexes. Like, for instance, if somebody says to me, can I help you with your work? I accept that, and I don't realize that they're trying to take my job, for instance. I think they're just being nice. And so my reflexes are not geared in that sense toward modernity. I'm not defensive enough in that particular way with regard to modernity. And there are other little holes in my defenses too that are just basically because I wasn't brought up with the values and the corresponding emotional reactions that would suit me to an effective survival within modernity, the modern system. Le système moderne. Was it la? Le, I think. So what I want to say is that the things that I've been through, they are a kind of state of being. My state of being is something that is already fraught with certain vulnerabilities, and I do want to maximize the health aspects of what I am and what I do. I don't want to ever succumb to anything again, actually, because I'm already in this between mode, this liminal kind of condition automatically. I'm already drawing inspiration and drawing knowledge from really two different directions simultaneously. I can draw knowledge from the past, and I have the emotions and the reflexes that are from the past, but I also aim to draw it from the present. And having that amount of input coming into me, it's already quite intense to see things on two levels, two cultural levels at the same time, and then to try to work between them, between really two different emotional languages. And all the dream scenarios seem to come from the past, but all the practical problems seem to come from the present. One dream I had from last night, the old style of sexuality and the old gender roles, they were really scary, and I had forgotten how scary they were. They were very, very, very scary. Luckily today we don't have them, but in the past you did, and sexuality was very fraught because it was to do with male rights and male property rights, and the wife or the woman was the male property. Imagine that. Very, very daunting to consider that today. But I had a dream specifically exactly about that last night. It's weird because my mother and I, we don't necessarily clash, but we don't see eye to eye because she is very, very conservative and very much into the old style gender role. Right now, she's dedicating herself to babies, grandchildren. This is her preoccupation. And I'm sure I had been reflecting on that because last night I had this dream about a couple who were getting married. And it could have been anybody, any of my relatives, but the way the dream made it seem, my mother was sleeping on a bunk bed, and she was like very emotional, and she was. I said, "No, pull yourself together. What's the problem? You know, you can't just lie there." And she said, "Oh, I'm just so worried about." The couple, their marriage wasn't consummated. And I'm like, what? And she said, yes, they seemed to be having fun earlier in the evening, but later they had a big fight. They had a real confrontation, and she was really abusing him and yelling at him. And it's not fair. He didn't know what he was in for. He's just a poor rifleman. I'm thinking, what? I said, who was getting married? And she said, your sister. So I don't know where that came from, but yeah. To interpret the scenario, I think it's the highly spirited female members of my family, especially on the father's side, very, very sort of spirited, sort of Latina, sort of Portuguese, easy peasy, but not actually very, very strong character on that side of the family, especially the women, kind of almost a matriarchy, and very fiery, very stubborn, and then marrying the poor rifleman, and he wants to have sex, but she's laying down the law, and and because sexuality wasn't even expected, there wasn't even, it wasn't spoken about. Nobody really knew necessarily what it was. So then automatically you would have that wall of resistance, like, no way, no way. Plus, I'm not your property. I'm not your patriarchal property. So, and then my mother sort of crying on the bed, and me saying, well, what is it? And, oh, it's your sister. And I'm saying, but I thought my sister in real life was already married, which, and in fact, she is already married. So this was, who is my sister? Weird what that might have meant. Now, it's probably pointless to look more deeply into that dream, although the uncle that was killed in Rhodesia during that war was a rifleman. And my cousin on my father's side was his daughter. Yeah. I don't know that there's anything deeper about that dream except that it conjured up the old-fashioned state of affairs for me. So like I say, sometimes it's like, oh wow, I had that revisualization of those old gender dynamics and how that used to be. I had to work really hard to get to recover from those gender dynamics. I mean, goodness me, I had to really put myself in uncomfortable situations on purpose to recover from the diminishment, the sense of being made small by them. Because even though I had a lot of fiery spirit from my father's side, and from it's an aristocratic side actually, on my father's side, they were Portuguese aristocrats in the 19th century, and lots of dignity, lots of fire there, especially, as I repeat, on the female side, very matriarchal. But in terms of my own upbringing and the way that I had been brought up, I was basically pressured more and more into a very narrow gender role once I began to reach puberty. And that was a cultural thing. That's why I disagree with psychoanalysis that said it was just a psychological thing. It was, God damn it, a very clear, very obvious cultural thing, not just something in my head. Damn you, if you think so. And if you think so, please assert it, and then let's talk about it like rational human beings, and don't just make the assumption and treat me as if it were true, because assumptions about me are rarely true. Especially if they've been conjured up by somebody in modernity that hasn't experienced this set of gender relations. They are almost never accurate. They're way, way off. Anybody that does that owes me an apology. Lots of apologies, please. Send them in. I accept checks as well, or repayment in goods and services. That would be all right as well. I had to get out of this very small position that my father had cramped me into, because the older I got, the more he became afraid that I'd become a loose woman. And he didn't like women, my father, anyway. He thought like female sexuality was dangerous and disgusting, and he thought women were defined by their hormones, by emotion, and not by anything else. So you're now reduced to a very narrow definition. You are no longer a person, you are emotion. And see how much I hated that, especially because I had that Portuguese fire within me. See how much I found that very, very distressing, because I wasn't anything but a conservative either at that time. I wasn't inclined to be loose or free or something that would be a shame to my family. But I do know, I am aware that all of the people in my father's lineage, the cousins I had, I don't know what happened to one of them, but I had another called Claire, and I have one called Pauline. They were, when they were around the age of puberty, they became very distressed for different reasons, probably, but or different ostensible reasons, but probably because of patriarchal values and the intent by the parent figures to really break their spirits so that they would not rebel, so that they would not bring shame on the family. And when I say break the spirit, I think that was really what was intended. It sounds like I'm exaggerating, but no, I think that was really what was desired and intended. Remember, this is ruthless colonialism. It's not like modernity. It's not. You can say it is, but it's not. Doesn't make it so. So the intent was to break them down, I think. I mean, in terms of what I can conjecture and in terms of what was done to me. So you are just emotion now. You are going to be male property. You can't be spirited. You must be compliant, submissive, and subservient. You can't define yourself by knowledge or intellect. You must define yourself as emotion, because that's the role you're needed to play. You have to be emotion. And the man has to be all these other things, the head of the house, logic and reason and power. That's not you. You've got to be smashed into shape. And very painful, very difficult to break somebody's spirit. And well, I mean, it's easy. I guess it's not difficult if you don't have a conscience. You can break somebody's spirit, but it's very difficult to be the one who is broken by it. You know, and I know when I speak about these things, everybody's, you know, they're incredulous. That doesn't happen. That would never occur. Yeah, yeah, really. Okay, but what you will find from me is that I have developed within myself, had to do it, a certain degree of counteracting ruthlessness. So if you want to play fire with me, I will play it back with you, because I have been treated so ruthlessly that I can be ruthless. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing that that I can be, and I will defend myself, because nobody else did. Ha ha, he he. I will. Watch out, I will. Uh-huh. Yeah, I had to get out. I was smashed into a tiny little gender role now, but that's why I would talk like this to the authorities, please. You know, that's why I would, because I had been pushed into such a small space. And it was only when I read Nietzsche I began to know what it meant, how I had been pushed down and pushed in, and what the cost had been on my health. My physical health especially, but then also my mental health. So to have that disease of colonialism, let's say a colonial disease of gender within one, and to try to combat that and to counteract that, has been the battle of my life. And that's why I've treated ruthlessly the people that have taken the wrong side against me, that said, wasn't really anything, just something you felt. Wasn't really intended to break you. It was just something that you had a feeling about for whatever reason. Yeah, really? You think that's how colonialism works? You think that it's about people having feelings for no particular reason? There's no real force, there's no power behind it. There's no brute force. You think that's your understanding of colonialism? Well, no wonder you supported Islamic extremism. No wonder you don't understand much about other cultures or other historical situations, and you think that they are all about identities or feelings. They're not about identities or feelings. They are about force. If you have to wear the hijab, that's not about feelings. That's about force. That's about necessity. Otherwise, you get your head chopped off, or something really bad, terrible, raped maybe. How about being raped? It's not. You don't do it necessarily because you are embracing an identity. And this is where the modern liberals are so mentally messed up. They really don't understand even what's in front of you. I am somebody that can testify. No, it was different. And I'm right in front of you. I'm here. I'm now. And I'll just be ignored and waved away, because the ability within modernity to understand something is so very limited by the parameters of modernity itself. It's, everything is kind of more or less nice and more or less just it's under control, just about, it can afford to be just about feelings in modernity. But I'm not from there, and I'm still, like I say, sort of 85, 90% maybe adjusted, but still I have to consciously also adjust and consciously put on the different hat, different garb, different attire, be modern, accept the new scenario, accept, fill in the new space, be emotionally part of the new world. It's not always automatic for me.